My name is Willard Hillegeist, and I'm a lifelong resident of Washington, D.C. The slaveholder in my ancestry was John Lewis Dufief. He was born in 1817 in this country. His father, Cherubim Dufief, brought his family to the United States, where they settled in New Jersey, I believe, at first. My great-grandfather, John Dufief, went to New Orleans, lived with his aunt, and when she died, he inherited money from her. He moved back to Montgomery County, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C., where he acquired about 1,100 acres of farmland. He built Millwood, which was a beautiful home on his property. He designed it because he had skills as an architect. Growing up, I heard stories about John Dufief. He was a major landholder. He designed buildings in Montgomery County, gave land in Darnestown, Maryland for the Presbyterian Church to be built. I knew of Dufief Mill Road. I knew that there was a Dufief Landing on the Potomac River. And in fact, there is a grade school named Dufief Elementary School in his honor or memory. I assumed he was a well-respected man to be honored in these ways. I understand that the Civil War ravaged his lands and that he was in failing health, and he then moved into Georgetown, where he died in 1877 and was buried in the Dufief family plot in Oak Hill Cemetery in Georgetown. Georgetown is now a community of Washington, but it was once a separate town. In all the stories of my great-grandfather, I assumed he was an honorable man, and it was only several years ago that I learned that he was an owner of slaves. I met a woman named Barbara Sherlock. She is the mother of a very close friend of mine, and she loves doing genealogy research. She asked if she could research both the Hillegeist and the Dufief family names, and I readily agreed and was very excited to find the material that she found. But among them, those items, was a list of 21 slaves, essentially 3 family names, several children named just with a first name. And frankly, that really disturbed me to come to realize that he was a slave owner. Frankly, it should have occurred to me, because you don't manage 1,100 acres of farmland without indentured servants at some point. However, it really did disturb me to realize that that was in my family history, and I was frankly ashamed. I grew up in essentially a white world. I was born in 1940. This country was segregated. Certainly Washington, D.C. was. It wasn't until 1952 that schools became integrated, but it's a practical matter. They didn't for many years, certainly in Washington, D.C. We had a few black students in my high school, a Catholic private school. I don't recall any at Georgetown University, where I went to school. So I lived in this white world. I guess the only person I knew was our maid, Alice, who I loved as a second mother. But Alice came to work. We talked. She went home. I didn't even know to where she went home or anything about her. My father was a realtor. He sold and developed neighborhoods that were limited to white Christians, Aryans. Jews and blacks were excluded. That was quite common in Washington, D.C., and it was a sense of, it was used in advertising to promote those neighborhoods. And I think he had some racist tendencies. We belonged to a country club that was only white Christians. I later, after I married, joined a country club that was also restricted to whites. Fortunately, that was struck down later on when the Montgomery County taxing authorities decided that they would not get the property tax benefits that the country clubs relied on for keeping only land, and all of that has changed. But it bothers me that that existed, and I wasn't socially aware of it. I wasn't conscious of it and what that meant. Later on, I begun to study a lot more about Black history, reading Brian Stevenson, understanding the horrors of the Emmett Till murder, the murder of 4 teenagers in Florida, and many other atrocities, including the Ku Klux Klan and all the rest. And I've come to realize that even when slavery ended, there were other forms of slavery in terms of paying bail on Black prisoners and then using them as indentured servants and farm workers in factories. It was quite prevalent in the South. We had Jim Crow. We had overt discrimination up until the 60s with the passage of equal rights laws. But even today, we're dealing with white supremacists who somehow decide that Blacks are less than they. I'm reminded of my father's sister and brother-in-law. They were missionaries in the Belgian Congo. While they devoted their lives to the people of the Belgian Congo, they always thought Blacks were inferior. And I grew up hearing that and just never quite understanding it. But I'm happy to say that my wife and I raised 2 daughters who show no signs of prejudice whatsoever. And I know my daughters are raising their children to think the same way. And I honestly believe that over time, racial, religious bigotry will disappear in our society as people become more enlightened.